Hello, Jacksonites. Take two of this video, but last time, if you couldn't tell, I was still getting over the last few days of a cold that I finally caught after a 15-month-long period of time where I did not manage to get sick. Normally, I'm a pretty sickly man. Like, I catch colds and flus pretty easily. It happens once every 6 to 10 months or so. But yeah, I managed to avoid it for 15 whole months. Before October of this year, the last time I got sick was back in May of 2023. So, damn it. And I managed to finally come down with it halfway through my vacation. So, I mean, I guess that's the best time to catch a cold is when you're on vacation because, going to work while you're fighting off like the flu or some shit is. Hold up. Okay. Okay, that's a little better. Uh, yeah, being at work and sick is not the most fun thing in the world. I also had a sore in my mouth that I was not feeling like going through a video of this length dealing with. So just was not feeling it last time. Not to mention too all the numerous interruptions that I was having. So yeah, I just wasn't feeling it last time. But I'm in a much more jovial mood this time. For the most part, I'm like 90% over my cold. All I have left is a little bit of nose and throat stuff, but I'm in a much better state than I was last time I tried to do this. So, back in 2021, I did a redo video of my top 20 favorite horror movies video. And while I'm not necessarily dissatisfied, kind of like with my early 2023 ranking the Halloween movies video, I'm not necessarily unsatisfied with my video that I did back then, but looking back on it, a few things have changed about me since then. Um, my opinion on a lot of horror films has been either softened or enhanced since then. Like there's a couple films that I had in my honorable mentions list in that video that have greatly grown on me since then. There's been some new films that have come out in the few years since I've done that video that have greatly impressed me and that I put on this list. Um, and also that list I did back in 2021, I excluded zombie movies. And I just kind of feel like I was really restricting myself in only including one or two installments of my favorite franchises. And I also just kind of forgot about some films that I really liked that just didn't make it onto the top 20 list. So, and also, I was inspired by two things. One is that I've been watching a lot of people's top 50 or 100 favorite horror movies videos, namely a top 100 list by a YouTuber called The Haunted Beard. He did a hour and a half long video counting off his top 100 favorite horror films. Now, obviously, I don't even think there's 75 horror films that I would say are well, obviously not, but I can never do a top 100. I am a big fan of the horror genre as much as a lot of haters on my channel in the past have tried to say that I am like a horror poser or a fake horror fan. I am a fan of the horror genre. There are a lot of horror films that I really like. I would say that it is one of my favorite film genres. But like everybody else, there just are certain things in the horror genre that I'm more partial to, and there's some installments of franchises that I'm much more partial to. So I'm just very vocal and very particular about what I like in the horror genre, and that really should not be seen as a bad thing. People have their tastes, people have their preferences, people have things they're not the biggest fans of, and people are different. Everybody has their own unique opinions. And I was also inspired partially by Meadow. She inspired me somewhat to do this video, but damn, I just cannot figure out what the best angle is. I'll stick with that for right now. Maybe. Hello, Roman. But I was also inspired by one of my new coworkers at work. Her name is Jess, ironically the same name as my sister. To do this video. So today I will be listing off my top 50 favorite horror films of all time. So kind of like I said, the originally this was a top 40, but the more I thought about it, there was a few more horror films that I was a big fan of. My list is going to be somewhat unconventional in some ways because this includes a lot of films, well, not a lot, but there's some films on here that in the past I have stated that they're not like super big fan, or like how do I explain this? It includes some films that in the past I've said I'm not a big fan of, but they've since grown on me since then. This includes some honorable mentions that I mentioned in my top 20 list back in 2021. Uh, but it also includes a lot of unconventional picks from various franchises. And with this list, I tried to be a lot more diverse and a lot more have a much larger variety. There are some films too that at one point in a terrible top 20 favorite horror movies video that I did back in 2018, I believe, those were booted out, but I put those back in. And there are some films on here that a lot of people aren't big fans of, but I'll explain them as I go along. Um, but yeah, this is very much my opinion. These are the films that I like. These are the films that are up my alley. These are the ones that work for me. They'll work for some other people, but a lot of other people will be like, "Why the hell are you putting that on a top 50 favorite horror movies video?" But I'll explain as I go along. Oh, damn it. Excuse my nose. Um, and without further ado, this is a top 50 list, and I have 5 additional honorable mentions, which I will explain as I go along. So without further ado, to kick off the spooky season, or no, put an end to the spooky season, because this is coming out on November 1st of 2024. But I still somewhat consider November to be spooky season epilogue until we get into Christmas time. Um, so yeah, fuck it. I figured this would be also a good way to somewhat make up for the lack of content that I've had on my channel for the last couple of months, especially for the spooky season. So yeah, let's just call it like that. So starting off with the burp fuel, regular Coke Zero to start off with. Ah, yummy. Alrighty. I have 5 honorable mentions. Honorable mention number 1, A Quiet Place, parts 1 and 2. Now, originally, this was on my top 20 list, both parts 1 and 2. But upon further looking into it, now these films haven't necessarily lost any value for me per se, but outside of them having a lot of suspense and some jump scares, they don't quite work as strongly as well, this one's a little hard to explain, but there's just 50 other films that are more like horror films than the Quiet Place movies that I put on my top 50. But that doesn't take anything away from how much I like the Quiet Place films. John Krasinski's directing is very strong and it's very well done. All the acting and all the performances are very good. The idea of a film that is very visual in today's day and age is somewhat novel and somewhat daring and original. Um, the second movie is a little more mainstream, like there's a little more action. You see more of the monsters and there's more characters and it feels a little bigger and expansive. But those are all things that I like that good sequels should do. So I don't really have a problem with that. But the first movie, the first A Quiet Place film, was a very big, pleasant surprise. It kind of seemed like it was at first going to be something that would just float under the radar. It would make some money, like a little more than its budget back, and that would be it. But was a big, pleasant surprise upon it hitting theaters. I actually saw it in theaters. It was a very good theater experience. And A Quiet Place Part Two, it's not quite as suspenseful as the first movie, but I at the same time, I think it is a little more intense because you see more of the monsters. You see more of the monsters killing people in this movie, which is a little more entertaining, but it's also a little more shocking. Um, and in my opinion, A Quiet Place Parts 1 and 2 go together as one whole film, just like bread and butter. Except for the kid who plays John Krasinski's son, you can obviously tell that he went through puberty between parts 1 and 2 because he's like 50 pounds heavier and half a foot taller in the second movie, but that's okay. Outside of that, parts 1 and 2 go together really well. I have not seen A Quiet Place Day 1. I'm not really all that interested in checking it out. I kind of feel like it's a bit pointless. We don't really need to see a prequel, like showcasing how the Death Angels, I guess that's what they're called, coming to Earth. We see enough of that in the opening of Quiet Place Part 2 to infer what actually happened around, sorry, my nose, around the rest of the world. So I just kind of feel like Quiet Place Day 1 is just a little pointless, but I'm sure I'll check it out at some point. But yeah, Quiet Place Parts 1 and 2, still really solid movies. There's just 50 other actual horror films that work for me more than those two. Coming in at number 4, honorable mention, is The Terminator. Now, purely the only reason why this is not in my top 50, it's not fully a horror film. It definitely has a lot of horror elements, as me, Shawnee Boy, and Trevor Thompson have talked about. It is kind of like the Terminator is kind of like a cybernetic slasher villain, just going around killing people in various ways, and he's an unstoppable juggernaut who pops back up every time you think he's dead. That's Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees. Well, you'll find out in just a minute, Jane Kim, what number 50 is. Um, But yeah, the only reason why this isn't on my top 50 is because it's not fully a horror film. There's a lot of sci-fi elements. There's a lot of 80s action elements. And there's some romance and 80s glamour thrown in. So yeah, it's not fully a horror film, but if you want to watch it as a horror movie, The Terminator definitely does work. It can work as any kind of film. It can work as an action movie, a sci-fi movie, somewhat as a romantic movie, as me and Meadow actually watched The Terminator on Valentine's Day together this year, right? So it works in any way. It's just a great movie, so you should just watch it anyway, as me and Shawnee Boy said. Yeah, number 4 honorable mention, The Terminator. Honorable mention number 3 is Tales of Halloween, my favorite horror anthology film. Tales of Halloween is obviously kind of copying the shtick and formula of the film Trick or Treat, but I think Tales of Halloween does it better than Trick or Treat. It's about 10 minutes longer than Trick or Treat, which is a huge improvement. May not sound like a whole lot, but that's always, in my opinion, has been the biggest flaw with Trick or Treat. Not counting credits, it's only an hour and 18 minutes, which I think is kind of lame. Um, Now, Tales of Halloween, it obviously has a bit of a lower budget than Trick or Treat. Like some of the effects are kind of all over the place. There's even one segment that one of the characters uses one of those like skull shaped airsoft masks for his Halloween costume, and to me, that just kind of screams cheap. There's a lot of crappy digital fire effects and some crappy CG blood. But what the film lacks somewhat in budget for its effects, I think it makes up for in heart. Like Trick or Treat, Tales of Halloween obviously is made by people who just love Halloween and love the spooky season. There's a lot of variety of directors that worked on this movie, like Darren Lynn Bousman, who was a big director in the Saw films. He directed I think one or two segments of Tales of Halloween. Um, there's a big variety of monsters. There's like a candy centric Halloween ghost that goes around and kills people. There's a crazy fairy tale witch that desperately wants a baby. There's a killer species of jack-o'-lanterns that goes around and eats people. There's Satan himself literally makes an appearance and goes on a little rampage, ripping off the film Satan's Little Helper, just doing it better. um, there's even a segment that totally makes fun of the Hatchet or Friday the 13th style slasher movie about a deformed backwoods slasher villain that gets attacked by an invading race of aliens. So yeah, it's made by people who love Halloween. It's got somewhat of a what's it? A genre friendly cast, like Samuel Witwer, Adrienne Barbeau make cameos. And yeah, there's the guest directors. Yeah, despite Tales of Halloween's low budget, I think it does the Halloween anthology film shtick better than Trick or Treat. Call me crazy. I know a lot of people really like Tales of Halloween or like Trick or Treat. Yeah, I like Tales of Halloween a little more. Coming in at number 2 is Wes Craven's New Nightmare. The only reason why this movie is not one of my top 50, while Wes Craven's New Nightmare is a really good film. Fun fact, it's actually Meadows' favorite Nightmare on Elm Street film, right? Um, it's very well made. It's very kind of ahead of its time, quite literally, as it literally just is prototype Scream. As I've always said, Wes Craven's New Nightmare is to the Nightmare on Elm Street series what Scream is to the entire slasher genre. Yeah, it's taken a big stab at how the studios were treating the Nightmare on Elm Street series. Wes Craven saw the decline of the franchise and how it just kept getting more and more watered down as the 80s and early 90s went on. And then Wes Craven just comes in and says, "Nah, that's not how you do a Nightmare on Elm Street movie." This is how you do a Nightmare on Elm Street film. Yeah, all the characters and the actors are very well done. The acting and performances are all really solid. It does a good job of being very meta and being self-aware, but it doesn't bring too much attention to it. Unlike Seed of Chucky, which that's definitely that film's biggest problem. That movie is too self-aware and too self referential to the point where it takes away from the story of the film. And it gets a little old just listening to Don Mancini just keep talking shit about the Hollywood system. It just gets a bit old. But Wes Craven's New Nightmare, it's meta and self-aware, but the film still takes itself really seriously, and it still feels like a Nightmare on Elm Street movie through and through. And also for fans of the first Nightmare on Elm Street film, even like Wes Craven had something to do with the third Nightmare film, but um, Wes Craven only had involvement directly, no pun intended, with the first movie and this film. So for people who are fans, big fans of the first Nightmare on Elm Street film, New Nightmare has a lot of callbacks and references to the first Nightmare on Elm Street film, which is a really good thing, but it's also not a bad thing, but that kind of is where New Nightmare kind of suffers for me. In the fact that it has a very low body count, just like the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie. And a couple of New Nightmare's kills are very homage heavy, like they're just kind of retreads of a couple kills from the first Nightmare on Elm Street film, which on one hand is cool to see them be done with a larger budget and a larger scale. But at the same time, as far as the kills are concerned, New Nightmare just doesn't really do anything new for the franchise. So that's a little disappointing. And the film also does lack Robert Englund and Freddy Krueger quite a bit. Now, thankfully, his presence is felt throughout a good chunk of the film, and the movie is literally about the Nightmare on Elm Street series. So it's not like the film loses focus of its central villain, but Freddy is really only saved for kind of the last half hour of the movie. That's when you really start seeing him a lot more often. But still, Wes Craven's New Nightmare is a really solid movie. Kind of the most underrated, in my opinion, of the entire Nightmare on Elm Street series. So it's a really good movie. It's just a little shy of reaching my top 50. And coming in, my number one honorable mention is a tie, which, by the way, in the top 50 list, there are going to be some ties here, but I'll explain those as I go along. Number one honorable mention is a tie between Night of the Living Dead, 1968, and the 1990 remake. Earlier this year, me and Meadow went on a bit of a zombie movie marathon, and for the very first time, she watched both versions of Night of the Living Dead. And now, while I still firmly say Night of the Living Dead 1968 is the most overrated zombie film ever made, it's the Citizen Kane of zombie films. Ultimately, I do actually like the movie. It's very tense, it's very gripping. There are some moments to this day that are still somewhat spooky and scary. Um, and for it being the progenitor of my favorite subgenre in horror, zombies, it does deserve a special place for me in that aspect. Same goes to the 1990 remake. While I still have some flaws with it's too short. It sticks a bit too close to the original for its own good, in my opinion. Namely, its ending and also letting or not letting Bill, played by Bill, Ben, played by Tony Todd, survive. Him dying just kind of feels like a kick in the teeth. Um, Anthony Sarkis is back. Hello. Um, Still, as far as horror remakes are concerned, Night of the Living Dead 1990 is without a doubt one of the best. It's made by people who have a very close connection to the original Night of the Living Dead. It feels like a loving homage and tribute to the original Night of the Living Dead. Uh, and while the effects and gore are censored and restrained, sadly, Tom Savini tried his absolute God, my nose. Excuse me. Tom Savini tried his best making this movie, and if it wasn't for the asshole studios, I think this movie could have been better. Like, it probably would have made my top 50, but still, in its current state, Night of the Living Dead 90 is still really solid. And both of these movies were this close, literally this close to making my top 50, but there's 50 other horror films that I like more than these two. But yeah, Night of the Living Dead, 1968 and 1990 are still good films. And so without further ado, let us finally jump into my top 50 favorite horror movies. A lot of these movies I have talked about before, either in depth or in passing. Actually, I'm pretty sure. No, there's a few on here that I've never really talked about. Uh, yeah, there's a few, but there are a lot of movies I have discussed. So I'm not going to spend too much time on each one of these, but just bear with me. And also, fun fact: aside from number 50 and number 49, outside of that, there is no film older than 1981 on my list. So 1981 is the furthest that I go back in history for my favorite horror films. Interesting. So yeah, nothing from the 70s, nothing from the 60s or the 30s, 40s. Nope, sorry. But yeah, these first two are from the 50s. At number 50 is The Creature from the Black Lagoon, my favorite of the Universal horror cycle. It kind of is a tragic story of Beauty and Beast, just like King Kong, which I'm sure that was a little bit of an influence on this movie. But yeah, my favorite Universal horror film of the classic cycle. My favorite Universal monster, which is kind of frustrating because it seems like the creature is the one who gets the least amount of respect. But there is a remake on the way being directed by James Wan, so I do look forward to that. And you kind of can count The Shape of Water as an unofficial remake of Creature from the Black Lagoon, and it works just fine. So there is that. But um, Revenge of the Creature is a fun 50s monster movie. Uh, The Creature Walks Among Us is kind of a disappointing finale, but there are a lot of other good films in the classic Universal horror cycle, but to me, ironically, it's towards the end, very end of the cycle. But yeah, The Creature from the Black Lagoon is peak Universal monster cinema for the classic cycle. The underwater cinematography is beautiful and fun to look at. The design of the creature is awesome and badass and breathtaking. The suit looks great. The effects are good. The music is fantastic. This is just a great fucking 50s monster movie. Um, Not much else to say. Just a great, great film. And coming in at number 49 is Them. Funny, both of my two oldest films are from the same year, 1954. Some people would probably be looking at me sideways, like, why is Them on here? While Them definitely is more, not by a whole lot, but it is a little more of like a generic cliche 50s atomic B monster movie. It's still well made. But there are a lot of scenes actually in this movie that are really spooky. Looking out in the empty desert plains of New Mexico and hearing that high pitched chirping sound of the giant ants kind of still does send shivers up my spine. Two scenes in particular. The first time that we hear it, and the little girl looks up and has that wide open, fearful expression on her face. And then the scene when the one police officer is left behind at the destroyed gas station, and then he's killed by an unseen monster, still to this day gives me chills. The design of the ants is spot on. They're just giant ants. They look great, but they also look freaky. An 8 foot long giant ant going around trying to eat and kill you. No thanks. Excuse me. The suspense is really good, and the effects, while they're used minimally, are still very well done and very well executed. Yeah, Them is just a fantastic monster movie and a really good horror film. Even if it does devolve into a generic monster on the loose rampage movie, it is still entertaining. Number 48, Texas Chainsaw 3D. A lot of people don't really like this movie, but I don't give a fuck. This is my favorite my second favorite Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. But I also think it's oddly the most no, not oddly. In some ways, I think it's the most underrated. I do definitively say it is a way better Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequel than the actual legacy Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequel with Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022. I like that movie, but this movie functions as a legacy sequel way, way better. It pays a lot more respect and admiration to the franchise's past. It brings back classic OG actors. Well, I mean, 2022 couldn't help it because most of them are dead at this point. Actually, no, all of them, I think, are dead by this point. But it makes a stronger attempt to connect itself to the events of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. Um, there's no annoying, stupid influencer character saying, "Try anything and you're canceled, bruh." Oh my god. Ugh. And while I do think that Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022 is a gorier film than Texas Chainsaw 3D, this movie does still have some pretty gnarly kills. And I think it's the most competently made of all the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, aside from one other. There's a lot more plot, there's a lot more characters, there's a lot of funny lines and a lot more of a like a what's the term? A lot of the filmmakers actually felt like proper fans of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series, and like there's a lot of passion and drive to make this as good as possible of a legacy sequel to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is why I think it's a real big shame that this movie is not as popular as it should be, in my opinion. Coming in at number 47 is Predator 2. I've said a few times that the Predator films aren't as scary as the Alien films. I think the Alien series works better as a horror series, whereas the Predator series works better as an action sci-fi series. But if you were to pick one installment of the Predator franchise that is actually scary, in my opinion, that will always be Predator 2, as I've stated before. The first Predator does not work as well for me as a horror film. As I've stated, that there is some suspense and there's a couple scenes of like a creep factor going on, namely in characters who feel like they're being watched, like Billy or Dutch. Um, so there is that at least, but there's not really a whole lot. Like there's not really any jump scares. There's not any really horrifyingly scary and disturbing moments in the first Predator film. I think it's just better as an action creature feature. It's great and entertaining as hell in that aspect, but it just doesn't really work for me as a horror film. I'm sorry to say. Predator 2, on the other hand, it has a lot of those same elements and feel of the first movie. It is very action heavy. It is very like creature feature and sci-fi heavy, but there are some jump scares, there are some creepy moments, and there are a couple disturbing scenes. Namely, when Jerry gets killed in the subway and when Danny gets killed in the penthouse. Those scenes actually kind of do give me chills. And there is a really good jump scare that still doesn't still get to me, but when I was a kid, it scared the living crap out of me. It's when Leona gets spooked by the city hunter in the subway. Um, and Predator 2 also does still retain the suspense and the creep factor that the first movie has. But and they're not as strong, but they are punctuated better by the jump scares. That is one thing that Predator 2 kind of lacks is the feeling of being watched and stalked like there was in the first movie. But like I said, Predator lacks the jump scares. Predator 2 lacks the suspense. It's like I've said many, many times, Predator and Predator 2 in many, many ways complement each other. What one thing does, the other one does not. What one thing doesn't have, the other one does in many, many, many ways. And that's why Predator 2 is my favorite Predator film of the pure Predator films. Coming in at number 46 is Happy Death Day. Now, you might be saying, why the hell is this movie on the top 50 favorite horror movies video and Quiet Place movies and Night of the Living Dead are not? Well, simply put, it's just because Happy Death Day is just more entertaining. Because that's another disclaimer I should have said about this list. It's not really in any particular order, but if there is an order, it's based on how scary they are to me, but it's also on how entertaining I find them to be. And Happy Death Day is entertaining as hell. It does lack scares. Like there's some moments of suspense and there are a couple decent jump scares, but they're nothing like a monster movie or a zombie movie because this is a PG-13 slasher. The scares and kills and horror elements are always going to be restrained. But this movie is just entertaining as all living shit. It's got a really fun concept. Um, it is entertaining to watch the main character go through a major character arc, turning from a shitty person into a loving, kind, and respectful person. Um, the music is awesome and kick ass as fuck. There are some decent kills that are pretty entertaining. There's some fun action scenes and some really funny jokes. Happy Death Day is a damn solid movie, and I don't give a shit what anybody says. It is PG-13, and that is the biggest flaw that the film will always have, but I can't help it. I just love the hell out of this movie. At number 45, we have The Black Phone. This is this is a damn solid movie. I like to think that The Black Phone is kind of an unofficial prequel to the film Sinister, which is on this list. It's on the list way lower than this. It does lack kills, and I guess it kind of does lack scares. Like it's not a very scary film. There are a couple unsettling scenes, and there is like a decent spooky atmosphere that permeates the film, but it has a very comforting 70s vibe. It has a comforting Stephen King vibe, which I really appreciate. But the main reason why I like this so much, the performances of the kid who plays Finney and Ethan Hawke as the grabber, both very entertaining. It's got a good concept. It's got fun characters and some funny jokes. But it's just a very tense film. It's honestly, in my opinion, one of the most intense films to come out in the last 5 years. The whole movie, you're so invested in watching this kid try to figure out how to escape this serial killer with the assistance of the spirits of his previous victims. It's an intriguing and spooky concept that just grows on me more and more every time I see this. It does get a little tired by the end of the film because we've been staring at the same set for 90 minutes at this point. It does get a little old by the end of it, but still, the film is very engaging. It's very well made and very entertaining. And I greatly look forward to The Black Phone 2 coming out next year. One of the biggest pleasant surprises of any movie of the last 5 years. I really dig The Black Phone. Coming in at number 44 is Jeepers Creepers 2. My favorite of the four Jeepers Creepers films by a fucking mile. 3 is meh. The first one's good, but I think they could have done better. And the fourth film's a fucking travesty. But Jeepers Creepers 2 is the first movie, but just done better. There's a lot of really intense sequences. There's some fucked up scenes, like the beginning when the little boy gets taken by the creeper. It's got a good cast, namely the addition of Ray Wise. He's an underrated actor, in my opinion. And Jonathan Breck as the creeper is front and center in this movie. His performance is top notch. His facial expressions and physical acting as the monster is top notch, in my opinion. The effects are an improvement on the first movie. There's some really intense action sequences. Jeepers Creepers 2 just does a lot of really good things that a lot of good sequels should do. More of the monster, more expansion on the lore, more kills, more characters, more gore. I love Jeepers Creepers 2. Very underrated sequel in my opinion. It's just a shame that the next two sequels are just so ass. This one might surprise some people. Coming in at number 43 is the original Hellraiser. Now, I've said for years that the Hellraiser franchise is just nothing but crap. And for years, I just had little to no interest in the Hellraiser franchise. A lot of that does still ring very true. The Hellraiser franchise does not need to exist in its current state. Um, 5 out of the 11 movies were, well, first off, 6 out of the 11 movies are direct-to-video bullshit garbage sequels. 1 is a streaming exclusive sequel that I will never see based purely on it being a streaming exclusive. Um, 3 and 4 actually, no. 7 of the films stray so far from Clive Barker's original content for the Hellraiser series, it's not even funny. Um, and yeah, 5 of the films were unrelated scripts that were crowbarred into bullshit Hellraiser sequels at the last minute. And as they went on, they tried to hide that fact even less and less. Like especially with films like Hellraiser Judgment and Hellraiser Deader, totally unrelated projects that literally had Hellraiser elements thrown in at the last minute. Like, here you go, here's another Hellraiser sequel. 10 seconds before or 10 seconds after it was called something else. Um, so the Hellraiser franchise is just a complete clusterfuck and needs a massive, massive course correction. Before Clive Barker bites the dust, he really needs to step in and course correct the Hellraiser franchise, which it seems like, even though I still have not seen Hellraiser 2022, that does seem like the kick in the ass the franchise desperately needed. But after years of resisting the urge, years of hearing people saying I should at least check out the first couple films, I finally did that a couple years ago, and I have to admit, the first movie, yeah, I like the first movie. Hellraiser 2 is not a bad film. It's actually a really good sequel. There's just some choices in it that I'm not a particularly big fan of, namely killing off the Cenobites and two sequences that reuse footage from the first film. Not a big fan of that, but the first Hellraiser movie actually is a pretty damn solid horror film. Fantastic special for for the most part. Hellraiser really reminds me of something like, oh, that's cool. Doug Bradley seems like a very pleasant man, so I'm sure that was a fun experience. Getting to meet Doug Bradley at Monster Palooza. So that's cool. Good for you. But yeah, Hellraiser reminds me in many ways of something like Phantasm. It's a rough movie. And despite the film being pretty violent and gooey, there are a lot of scenes where it's pretty obvious that Hellraiser got cut to hell, like somebody actually got a couple Cenobites to take hook chains to the film. There's a lot of obvious cuts and censoring all throughout the film, which gets distracting after a little while. It's not like Friday the 13th in the 80s level bad, but there are still a lot of scenes where you can tell, yeah, that was cut, that was cut, that was cut. Um, and Clive Barker obviously was a very novice director at the time, and it shows. But what he lacks in inexperience, he makes up for with just such a creative vision and a creative mind. And, just as an 80s effects heavy creature feature kind of film, it is still entertaining. It's got some good performances, namely from Andrew Robinson as Kirsty's dad. Ashley Lawrence isn't bad as Kirsty, but you could tell that this was her first movie, so her performance is a little inconsistent. The effects are also somewhat inconsistent, like the optically animated lightning effects for the Cenobites at the end of the movie are pretty hit or miss, to say the least. And the engineer monster looks pretty ass as well. There's one shot where you can literally see the motor that's pushing it right behind it on screen. But yeah, the music is great. The performances, for the most part, are pretty solid. When the effects are good, the effects are fantastic. Like when Frank is regenerated back to a ooey gooey skeleton at the beginning of the film. That's a great scene of practical special effects. Um, the music is great. It's got a really haunting, creepy atmosphere, and it's just so weird and so otherworldly and so original. You can't help but just be fascinated by the film. And while the Cenobites have very limited screen time, when they are on screen, the film is a lot of fun. So yeah, the first Hellraiser movie, it has some flaws, and it's a very rough film around its edges. But yeah, Hellraiser is a pretty unique and interesting beast. Coming in at number 42 is The Dead from 2010. A zombie film that takes place in Africa. Good enough for me. I saw this on the Sci-Fi Channel a couple years after it came out, and I was very impressed by this film. The idea in and of itself, a zombie outbreak that takes place in Africa, excuse me, had me intrigued right from the start. An entire continent that has so many different terrains and so many different types of like savannas or forests or swamps or um, vast desert plains. What a great place for a zombie outbreak. And yeah, it works pretty well. And for being a sci-fi channel movie, it's surprisingly quite gory. The effects and acting are surprisingly really solid. It kind of has a bit of a bleak ending, which doesn't really work for me. But the movie before that is just so good, I can kind of excuse the bleak ending. But yeah, The Dead is a very, despite the very generic title, um, The Dead is a very underrated and underappreciated zombie movie. Check it out. It's quite a find. Coming in at number 41 is Misery, one of my favorite Stephen King films of all time and one of my just favorite films overall. Misery is a damn solid movie. Me and Shawnee Boy talked about this in our top 10 favorite Stephen King's video, so I'm not going to say too much. The cast is really good. James Caan is really good as James as Paul Sheldon, and of course Kathy Bates is phenomenal as Annie Wilkes, one of the best on-screen female villains of all time. Her performance is just so good. Like she definitely deserved to win that Oscar. It's kind of a shame that James Caan didn't, but he got something out of it at least still. But yeah, Kathy Bates is fantastic. The suspense and tension is unbearable at times. The whack ass crazy performance of Kathy as Annie is captivating, but also freaky as fuck to watch sometimes. Um, there's some intense moments. There's some creepy and suspenseful sequences that'll have you like biting your fingers off. Misery is a damn solid movie. Not much else to say about it. Coming in at number 40 is Deadstream. This was also a big pleasant surprise last year. I had heard some things about it here and there, namely from James Rolfe, surprisingly. And when I saw that this was a Shudder film, I was very hesitant to check this out. I am a big fan of found footage films, but I do acknowledge that, as I've said back at the beginning of last year, it is a very hard genre to get right. And hearing about this movie engaging in a lot of cur- uh, current social media influencer or prankster just for views, YouTuber bullshit schemes. I just fucking hate that shit. I was like, I don't know if I want to watch this, but I broke down. It was like $10 at work, so I was just like, okay, fine, I'll check it out. And it turned into a big pleasant surprise. It kind of is like, how do I put this? Evil Dead mixed with a little bit of the Blair Witch Project with Um, the haunt, like any kind of haunted house movie, mixed with something like Freak Encounters or McJuggernuggets or some shit. There are quite a few scenes that are pretty batshit crazy. That's where the Evil Dead comes in. There's a big variety of ghosts and demons and monsters executed via cheesy special effects, like with some puppets and props and uh cheaper looking practical effects, but there are some decent gory practical effects that are pretty solid. There are some pretty batshit crazy moments. There are a couple decent jump scares and a couple decent moments of peril. Like I'm actually a big fan of urban exploration and ghost videos, and this movie channels that um, feel somewhat at times. And yeah, it was just a very pleasant surprise. This movie had a lot of things going against it at first going into it, but I came out of it very entertained and very pleasantly surprised. I didn't much care for its ending, but that's pretty typical for found footage films. So again, I could just kind of take it for what it is because the rest of the film is so entertaining. I just leave that alone. But yeah, Deadstream was a big pleasant surprise. And yeah, happy November. Happy first day of November. Coming in at number 39 is Scream 3. My favorite of the Scream franchise, not counting the TV show because I haven't seen the TV show. A lot of people tend to not like Scream 3. A lot of people I've heard say that this is their least favorite of the Scream series. And they say it's for a lot of reasons why they don't like it is like it's too Hollywood, it's too self-aware, it's too meta. It doesn't take itself seriously. It's predictable. I mean, yeah, they're right in some aspects. Like it is kind of predictable at times. It does delve a lot more into making fun of itself, unlike the first two Scream films. Um, it does kind of play it. No, I wouldn't really say it plays it safe. I think the fourth film does that a bit too much, but Scream 3, oddly, is just the one that resonates with me the strongest. The performances are great. There's some good quiet scenes with the characters. It is the tamest of the Scream series, but this is the only one that has only one killer, and I actually think that's kind of refreshing. So you can just kind of try to figure out who, like, if there's only one person who's the killer, or now that doesn't make sense, but like, I find it to be somewhat refreshing that there's only one killer because having two and even three, like in Scream 6, I think just gets to be a bit too messy. Um, and well, again, yes, it does go a little too, no, not too far. It does double down on the commenting on the studio and making fun of the horror genre. I just think it does it the best. A lot of the jokes that it makes towards the Hollywood studio system I think are quite valid. They're funny because they're true. Um, and it does go like it emulates a lot of the uh cliches and tropes of the horror genre, but I think it does it in a way that is still entertaining. Like stuff I don't really think if something's cliche, that makes it a flaw. I mean, yeah, it's cliche and overdone and overplayed, but if it's done well, that mediates it being cliche to the point where it feels tired. And I think Scream 3 handles a lot of its cliches still quite well. And just overall, this was the one that captivated me and entertained me the most. I just can't really deny it. Yeah, Scream 3, I really like. Like it a lot more than most. Um Coming in at number 38 is The Invisible Man 2020. I've talked about this one quite a bit. Um, yes, Hollow Man is a better remake of The Invisible Man, but The Invisible Man 2020 is still a really solid movie. It's a very good update on the Invisible Man concept, almost to the point where it doesn't feel like because it's a suit, not like some kind of scientific formula, but it does still have its roots settled in science fiction, just like the original H.G. Wells novel. But the main focus of what makes this movie so good is the performances of Elizabeth Moss as an obviously very traumatized, very troubled young woman trying to escape an abusive relationship, and how this movie explores domestic violence, bringing light to how serious it really can be without feeling exploitative. It's done very tastefully. It's handled in a very non-triggering, non-insulting way, in my opinion. Yeah, The Invisible Man 2020 is a very solid film. It's got some good action scenes, some good effects, a couple really good moments of suspense, and a couple good jump scares. Yeah, damn solid movie. One of the best films of the 2020s. Number 37 is Planet Terror, my second zombie film on this list. This movie is just pure balls out, ooey gooey, splattery entertainment. Lots of scantily clad babes wielding giant machine guns, mowing down zombies left and right. Lots of people being torn apart by zombies left and right in fantastic ooey gooey K and B effects galore. It's very violent, very bloody, very splattery and over the top in typical Robert Rodriguez slash Quentin Tarantino fashions. A fantastic soundtrack, great action scenes, some really funny lines and funny characters. Planet Terror just kicks fucking ass. Death Proof does not work for me really hardly at all, but Planet Terror just gets better and better for me every time I see it. Except for the ending. I think it's just a bit too abrupt and underwhelming, but still the movie leading up to it. And if you live in Texas, Planet Terror, you should just eat it up because it oozes Texas out of every single one of its pores, just like the zombies gushing blood and pus out of every sacred hole in its body. This film gushes Texas out of every sacred hole in its body. Yeah, Planet Terror kicks ass. Number 36, Spiral from the Book of Saw, my favorite Saw film. This is the one that captivates me the most. And a lot of people might not like, namely Saw fans, they may not like how separated from the rest of the Saw franchise this feels. I can somewhat agree. It really kind of only has a, what's the term? Like, it has a loose connection to Saw, but it really feels the most isolated away from the rest of the Saw series. But I think that's okay because the main Saw timeline is such a clusterfuck. Going to this movie, it really does feel like it's trying to do its own thing, just taking the most basic elements of the Saw films and just tell its own engaging, unique story. And I think Spiral succeeds. Now, when it is a Saw film, it's not bad, but I think it's kind of generic and basic. Like the traps are kind of fucked up, but they're not nearly as over the top and carnage candy splattery as some of the later Saw films are. This one feels like it's going more back to basics, but in that way too, it also does feel refreshing. So they're trying to focus on telling an engaging story with engaging characters. And I think that's where Spiral succeeds its best. The presence of Sam Jackson is very welcomed. He gives a good performance, but I can't really think of any movie where Sam Jackson gives a bad performance. And Chris Rock, despite predominantly being a much more comedic actor, he actually is pretty damn good in a horror film, or at least a cop movie that becomes a Saw film. And that is what this film is. It also rings a little more true for me because in the last couple of years, I've become a much bigger fan of cop films and police procedural films and shows. So this movie, I just eat it up in that aspect too. Yeah, Spiral from the Book of Saw, I think is a pretty underrated film. I haven't really seen anybody talk shit about it, but I think it's a damn good Saw film. Coming in at number 35 is the first proper tie of this list, Alien versus Predator slash Alien versus Predator Requiem. Now, for both films, the flaws and nitpicks that I have still ring true. Alien versus Predator did not need to be PG-13, even though it does make it work. It only just barely works. The Predators are kind of under equipped and get their asses kicked a bit too easily, in my opinion. And as for Requiem, oh my god, it has flaws galore. The characters suck. It's too damn dark. The acting is very hit or miss. The script feels half baked, and the ending is a bit abrupt and anticlimactic. So Requiem does have flaws, but these movies are just so damn entertaining. The first Alien versus Predator is a fantastic blending of two of the best sci-fi alien horror franchises ever made. Fantastic effects, great action scenes. I like the human team up, the human predator team up dynamic that this film showcases. Uh, yeah, fun action scenes, a fantastic display of the Queen Xenomorph. She looks fantastic. And Alien versus Predator Requiem, just watching Wolf go on a fucking rampage, tearing apart xenomorphs left and right, is always entertaining. The Predalien is a great addition to Yautja and xenomorph lore. Is a fantastic monster, a good supplement for the Queen Xenomorph. It's very violent. It's very gory. I'd probably say that Requiem is the most violent of the Alien and Predator franchise, followed right behind by Predator 2, The Predator 2018, and Alien Resurrection. Um, and it has a fun 80s monster movie vibe to it, which I really appreciate. So, yeah, these movies have some flaws, but I just can't deny it. Alien versus Predator is one of my favorite films of all time, and Requiem does have some flaws, but I think I was a little too harsh on it back in my review back in 2021. Yes, I do want there to be another Alien versus Predator film, and I have heard that it seems like they might be tossing around some ideas with the success of Prey and Alien Romulus. Like Fede Alvarez and Dan Trachtenberg might come together to make another Alien versus Predator movie. That'd be awesome. Yes, please. It seems like Disney has been treating both Alien and Predator pretty well. So bring it on. I don't care. I haven't seen Romulus yet, but it does look very promising. But I have seen Prey. Prey was pretty good. Coming in at number 34 is Sleepy Hollow. Meadow's actually a big fan. I've made her a pretty big fan of Sleepy Hollow. Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow from 1999. Happy 25th anniversary to this movie. This is hands down, in my opinion, one of Tim Burton's most underrated movies of his entire filmography. And I will always say that it's a big shame that Tim Burton doesn't do more horror movies, because I think he would be really, really good at it. And obviously, with this film, he is really good at it. It's just a shame that he doesn't do more. Um, this movie is a big, loving tribute to classic Gothic Hammer horror films from like the 50s and 60s. Hell, it has Christopher Lee playing he's a judge, I think, in a small role at the beginning of this. Some of the dialogue's kind of hokey, like it feels like dialogue from a classic Hammer film. It's very foggy, it's very gloomy, it's very gothic and almost black and white in tone and look, which feels like just a huge homage to the classic Hammer horror films, which is really appreciated and really well done. Johnny Depp gives a really good performance as Ichabod Crane. It has elements of being like a Sherlock Holmes style murder mystery investigation film, but it's done well. Um, the cast it's got a really good cast. Christina Ricci, Johnny Depp, Christopher Lee, uh, Michael Goldman. No, Michael Gambon. Excuse me. Jeffrey Jones. Yeah, there's some things he's done recently that are not very pleasant, but he was still a good actor for a while. And even what's his name? Ian McDermott makes a couple appearances in this movie, and he's entertaining too. So yeah, great cast. Even Christopher Walken makes a couple appearances. A great Tim Burton as fuck cast, which is really good. Like if you love Tim Burton, Sleepy Hollow just oozes Tim Burton all over the place. Um, and the Headless Horseman is a fantastic horror villain. There's some really good kills. This movie is quite violent. Like tons of head decapitations, people getting sliced in half, impaled, and torn apart. And the blood, not very realistic, but because this movie is so gloomy, the bright red blood is very vibrant and red compared to the rest of the movie, which surely probably was done on purpose to make it stick out a lot more. Yeah, Sleepy Hollow is a damn solid movie. Again, one of Tim Burton's most underrated films in his entire filmography, and is in my top 5 list of my favorite of his movies, alongside Big Fish, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Ed Wood, and fuck. What's the fifth one? Fuck, I can't remember. Damn it. Sorry. Yeah, one of my favorites. One of my favorites. Love Sleepy Hollow. Oh, Dark Shadows. That's what it was. Yeah, that's the fourth one. Along with Sleepy Hollow. Those are my top 5 favorites. Coming in at number 33 is an oldie but goodie. Friday the 13th, Part 6. Jason Lives. Not much to say about this. This is my favorite of the Paramount era for the Friday the 13th franchise. I actually went on a little bit of a Friday the 13th marathon throughout the month of October. I rewatched Friday's part 3, 4, and 5. I still like part 3 more than 4, and I also like part 5 a lot more than most people give it credit for. But part 6 is the best, without a doubt, of the Paramount era. It's got some hellaciously censored kills, and that probably is the biggest flaw that the film has. But outside of that, the movie is just fun. It's very entertaining. There's a lot of classic Universal Monster homages that are very appreciated. Um, oh, is it? That's cool. It's my third or fourth favorite. Jason Lives is my third or fourth favorite Friday film. CJ Graham is really good as Jason, and this is I don't know. No, I wouldn't say this is my favorite version of zombie Jason, but it is a very good start to the zombie Jason era of the Friday the 13th franchise. And yeah, without a doubt, you can make your debates on whether or not Jason has been a zombie since day one. I personally don't, but if there's any doubt beforehand, there should be none with this movie. Jason is just a full on zombie Frankenstein monster killing machine in this movie. And man, is he entertaining as hell. Despite the censored kills, Jason is just a fucking juggernaut in this movie. And yeah, he's entertaining as hell. A great soundtrack, good kills despite them being censored, fun characters. This is just a fun flick, undoubtedly. Yeah, Friday Part 6, love it. Coming in at number 32 is Alien. I still stand by this is the like the least rewatchable film of the Alien series. You kind of have to be in a certain mood to watch this. It does take its time. It is slower. A lot of the characters are pretty unlikable. Um, it's very 70s in many ways, but that adds to the film's charm. But it doesn't take away from the fact that Alien still is a fantastic movie. It's a great monster movie, a great sci-fi film, a great haunted house movie in space. The effects are good. The xenomorph is not showcased the best for the franchise, but in a very similar manner to Jaws. It implies they imply the Xenomorph's presence more than show it. But when they do show it, it is still a terrifying monster, and there are some really disturbing and freaky moments all throughout the film. So it's a great start to a great franchise. And you know, any praise that is thrown at the original Alien, I will always agree with. Alien is a great film, one of my favorites. Number 31 is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003, one of my favorite horror remakes of all time. In a future video that I have planned, I do have some things to say about this movie, so I'm going to keep this brief. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003, not only is it one of my favorite horror remakes, but I do think it is genuinely one of the best horror remakes ever made. It's not a cash grab by any means. It's not trying to cash in on renewed interest in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. But it definitely is a good redemption of the TCM franchise after Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. Holy fucking shit. This movie is far superior to that movie. Um, it feels a lot like King Kong '05 or Star Wars Episode 7. This feels like a loving tribute or homage to the original TCM. It was made by some people who were very experienced with the TCM franchise. It has the same cinematographer, for example. The cast is better. The effects are way, way, way better. The kills are better. And even though this movie is obviously much more violent than the original TCM, it's not as over the top violent as you might think. It's violent enough to be shocking and disturbing, but it's not an over the top gore fest like TCM the beginning. Um, there's some really intense chase sequences. Leatherface is a big, giant, hulking juggernaut in this movie. I don't like that he gets his arm cut off, but that also does go to show that Aaron is played by Jessica Biel is a much better final girl than the original Sally, I think her name was in the original TCM. But the hands down, the highlight of this movie is Arlie Ermy as Sheriff Hoyt. Definitely one of the best examples of an actor that's good at playing characters you love to hate. He's so psychotic, so captivating, so creepy, and just so entertaining. He is definitely the highlight of this movie. Good old Arlie Ermy. Yeah, TCM 03 is a damn solid movie. Coming in at number 30, Candyman, 1992. This was another honorable mention that I had in my original top 20. And since then, this movie has greatly grown on me since first watching. And not just since the um top 20 list, but as I have said before in my review, every time I watch Candyman, it just grows on me more and more, and that definitely is the case. Tony Todd is fantastic as Candyman. Virginia Madsen's really good as Helen. There's some really good, shocking, violent, gory kills with some good special effects. Oh, you got to meet Tony Todd? What was he like? Was I'm sure he was. I know he's a tall man, so it must have been like, um, oh, I would love to hear his voice in person. Tony Todd has a lovely voice. Burt Fuel number 2, regular vanilla Coke. Yum. He's a cool dude. That's good to hear. Tony Todd's always come off as a pretty down to earth kind of guy. Um, but yeah, he's fantastic as Candyman. He's creepy. He's disturbing and scary, but he is also a little alluring, but also captivating at the same time. His Whenever Tony is on screen, I just can't take my eyes off him. His voice is fantastic. His presence is creepy and domineering. Um, His backstory is quite tragic and sad too. So I guess because this is a Universal film, you could almost count Candyman as another Universal monster. So I'd say that's pretty fitting. And of course, a fantastic musical score by Philip Glass and a very hauntingly tragic, disturbing, fucked up ending uh, to go along with it. Yeah, Candyman's a fantastic movie. It's kind of underrated despite its cult status. And yeah, definitely one of the best '90s horror movies ever made. Love Candyman. Coming in at number 29 is Child's Play 2. Outside of the remake, this is my favorite of the Brad Dourif Child's Play movies. And this just does a lot of those things that I always talk about with good sequels. You see more of the villain, there's more kills, there's more gore, there's more action, there's more humor. Everything that was great about the first Chucky movie, Child's Play 2 does even better. Not much else. Even there's better characters and better acting because Alex Vincent's acting in the first film is pretty ass, but in this movie, it's pretty solid. Yeah, Child's Play 2, damn solid movie. Very fun film. Number 28 is Leviathan from 1989. My favorite, number one favorite underwater monster movie. It is very much ripping off like Alien and also John Carpenter's The Thing, but they rip it off well and they still do something pretty original, in my opinion. I'm very much afraid of the deep sea, like what the hell is below the surface of the ocean, 5 miles underwater. No thanks. Being trapped inside essentially a tomb 5 miles underwater at any moment, it could implode and crush you like a cheap suit in a dryer with some kind of monster running around trying to kill you. It still is effective. It's got a great cast: Richard Crenna, Peter Weller, Ernie Hudson. Fantastic special effects by Stan Winston. It's fairly gory. It's just a very underrated, underappreciated monster movie. Yeah, I love Leviathan. Number 27, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the Kenneth Branagh, Robert De Niro Frankenstein film. Also, happy 30th anniversary to this movie, too. I will always say that Robert De Niro as the Frankenstein monster is like two names in the same sentence that I never thought I would see. And to this day, I'm just like, wait, what? Robert De Niro is the monster? That is so whack. And it's also even more whack that, in my opinion, Robert De Niro is the best actor to portray the monster. It's a strange choice, but it does work. It also does help that this, without a doubt, is the most accurate adaptation of the novel. It very much is copying the style of Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, but I always preferred this movie over Coppola's Dracula. Coppola's Dracula is a great adaptation of the novel. It has great special effects, a great cast, but yes, it adapts the novel well, but I've never been the biggest fan of the original Dracula novel. I've always been much more Team Frankenstein in characters, the book itself, and this movie. And again, yes, this movie obviously is copying the style of that movie, but it is a good formula. So you just apply that to the Frankenstein story and it works. This movie is very violent. It's got very good special effects and it has also a similar star-studded cast. Oh, is it? The Hallmark Frankenstein miniseries from 2004 is the most faithful adaptation. I've never seen that. I've never heard of that. Um, or maybe I might have. I'm not sure if James Rolfe reviewed that. But of the adaptations that I've seen, this definitely is the most accurate. Yeah, this movie also has a really good cast. I was like, duh, Robert De Niro, Kenneth Branagh himself plays Victor Frankenstein. There's Ian Holm as Victor Frankenstein's father. Helena Bonham Carter as well, playing Elizabeth. This movie has it all. It's a great adaptation, big lavish sets and great special effects. It's very violent and a big star-studded cast. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is very underrated in my opinion. And I sadly do think it is kind of overshadowed by Coppola's Dracula, but I've always been much more of a bigger fan of this movie. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein kicks ass. Number 26 is the 2010 Wolfman, my second favorite werewolf movie of all time. The compromised CGI uh, special effects and kills are probably this movie's biggest issue. And, oh, excuse me, this chair is uncomfortable. Oh, you dig my shirt? My John Carpenter's The Thing shirt? Oh. Ooh. Ooh. And sometimes Benicio del Toro's performance is a little wooden as Larry Talbot, but um, Anthony Hopkins is fantastic as Sir John Talbot. When the effects are practical, like the practical Wolfman effects, they're fantastic. I mean, Rick Baker won another Academy Award for his werewolf effects for this film, and I think it was his final movie before he retired. So, I mean, it's not a bad movie to go out on if you win another Academy Award. And aside from Del Toro, this movie does still have a really solid star-studded cast. Namely, of course, Anthony Hopkins, but also, oh, what the hell's his name? Oh, Hugo Weaving? Is that it? As one of the main detectives in this movie. He's really good. And this movie was also made by obvious fans of the original Wolfman and, of course, the original Universal Horror Cycle. I mean, Del Toro himself is a big fan of the original Wolfman. Aside from his somewhat stilted performance, you still do get the feeling that this was a passion project for Del Toro. So I do appreciate that. There's some great kills. There's some really good gore. Um, Great action scenes. It's a little silly watching Anthony Hopkins as a werewolf fight Benicio del Toro as a werewolf, but it's still entertaining as hell. It's a big shame that this movie was such a flop because I would have loved to see a couple sequels, but still, the 2010 Wolfman kicks ass. And I saw this in theaters, so I do have a little bit of biasness towards it, as this was actually the very first horror movie I ever saw in theaters. Number 25 is the 1988 remake of The Blob. This is just a pure 80s sci-fi monster movie at its very best. It is nothing else but that. You sure it has some conspiracy theory elements and some like fuck the authority elements to it. But if you just want to watch a classic 80s monster on the loose movie, you can't get much better than this movie. The kills are fantastic. The effects still hold up to this very day. It's violent and gory and fucked up. Kind of ballsy because it kills off a couple kids in some pretty fucked up ways. It's great action scenes. It's just an entertaining as fuck monster movie. I love the 88 Blob. Number 24, Child's Play 2019. Also have some bias towards this because I saw it in theaters with Meadow, actually. Mark Hamill is great as Chucky. It's got a good classic 80s vibe to it, which I really like, and a little bit of a Stranger Things vibe to it as well. All the kid characters are pretty funny and entertaining. There's some good jokes, and it is very different from the original Chucky series, but it still does feel like a Child's Play movie, even if it is just a AI slash robot going on a killing spree and getting unhealthy attachments to a human. Oh my god, it's the movie Megan. Except Megan came after this. It's got a decent cast. It's got some great kills, a couple decent jump scares, and while it kind of does have a bullshit sequel bait ending, I think it is pretty obvious at this point this movie's not getting a sequel, unfortunately, which is a big shame. But yeah, Child's Play 2019. I love the fuck out of this movie. Um, Another one of my favorite remakes. Number 23 is oop, hold up. Hollow Man. There we go. Yes, as I said earlier, Hollow Man is technically a better remake of the original Invisible Man than the actual Invisible Man. I mean, the plots are very similar in the basic strokes. Both movies are about brilliant scientists that discover some kind of chemical formula that renders them invisible. And when at first they try to find a cure to revert themselves back, but the power of being invisible overtakes their mind and they become lunatics with the desire to rob and kill. Yeah, both movies are the same. Um, but you know what? It still works. Kevin Bacon is fantastic as Sebastian Kane. Yeah, Kevin Bacon's a damn good actor now that I'm thinking about it. Like in recent years, I've come to discover that Kevin Bacon actually is a pretty, excuse me, pretty diverse actor. Um, oops, sorry, I'm looking something up real quick. Hello, Roman. Oh yeah, definitely. Now, definitely. Child's Play 2019 is not getting a sequel because of the existence of the Chucky TV series, which is sad. But yeah, Kevin Bacon's really good as Sebastian Kane. He perfectly embodies the brilliant scientist while also the crazed, murderous, invisible lunatic. The special effects are fantastic and I think have aged very well. How they depict invisibility in a much more scientific way is very plausible and very believable, in my opinion. It's quite violent and gory in typical Paul Verhoeven fashion. Action scenes are pretty entertaining. The cast is also really solid. Elizabeth Shue, Josh Brolin, Kevin Bacon. Those are the three biggest cast members. But yeah, they're all really good. The chemistry is really solid. The suspense is good. Yeah, I love Hollow Man. One of the most underrated films of the early 2000s. Coming in at number 22, Sinister. I have a lot of nostalgia for this movie because it was the very first film that I ever reviewed on my YouTube channel. That doesn't exist anymore, but I still remember it to this day. And one of the best horror films of the early 2010s. Amazing suspense, a great true crime murder investigation aspect that's very captivating and very entertaining. Great performances by Ethan Hawke and the rest of the cast, but in particular Ethan Hawke, and has a surprisingly solid, bleak ending that doesn't bother me much to this day. Um, Great kills, great suspense, great scares. Sinister is awesome. One of my favorite horror films ever. One of my favorite movies in general. I love Sinister. At number 21, we have The Mummy from 1999. Now, this movie, it has some horror elements to it, but this movie is just highly entertaining. And of course, as I stated, it's my favorite. Hmm. Actually, no, there it. Oh, but that's hard. I would say of for the fuck. It's my favorite movie based on one of the classic Universal monsters. I'll put it that way. But The Mummy from 1999, I just love the living shit out of. It's a very good adaptation, or it's a very good reimagining and retelling of the original 1932 Mummy. Brendan Fraser is, of course, fantastic as Rick O'Connell. I would have liked to see The Mummy in theaters. I sadly missed out on that, but I'm a little ashamed to say that. But I don't think it was playing at my theater, so I'm not fully to blame. But I would have loved to see this in theaters. This is a very good theatrical movie. Big screen, big sound system. It's a blast. The effects are fantastic. Somewhat dated for the CG, but it's 25 years old, so I give it a little bit of a pass. It's aged like fine wine, in my opinion. Arnold Vosloo is really good as Imhotep. There are some decently suspenseful and scary moments. Fabulous action scenes. Um, great fucking music by Jerry Goldsmith. The Mummy is just a very special movie. And you might be wondering, as much as I love it, why is it only number 21? I think it's more of an action adventure movie than it is a horror movie. But it has effective horror movie elements to it. So, yeah, Mummy 1999, love it. Love it to death. I would also like to see a Brendan Fraser Mummy 4, but I'm not holding my breath anymore. And coming in at number 20, we have another tie. And this is when we're going to be getting into some big heavy hitters. But there are also a lot of movies that I have talked about on here that talked about before. So I may not have much to say about them, but still, just bear with me. Coming in at number 20 is a tie between Evil Dead 1981 and Evil Dead 2013. Evil Dead 1981 has also kind of grown on me, namely since I did my ranking video with Shawnee Boy. I just came to realize, you know what? You know what? I actually really do like this movie. And also, too, me and Meadow um, went on a marathon of watching all of the Evil Dead movies except for Evil Dead Rise earlier this year. She also likes the original Evil Dead the most, and she likes Army of Darkness the least. Great minds think alike. Um, yes, Evil Dead 1981 is a very rough movie, like Hellraiser and Phantasm. It's made by amateur filmmakers. There's some iffy performances, there's some iffy special effects, and there are times where it looks very amateurish and even unfinished. But that just kind of adds to this movie's charm, in my opinion. It's very intense. It's very violent and gory and fucked up. It's very loud and boisterous and bombastic. It's just a batshit crazy, messed up good time. And the same can be said also for Evil Dead 2013. This movie is very violent. It's very gory. It's got some amazing special effects. It is very similar to the original film, and it is missing those trailer shots that I think is a bit of a shame. And it does lack an Ash type character, but still, Evil Dead 2013 is a very entertaining film. It still does feel like an Evil Dead movie. Um, and it retains that classic ooey gooey splattery fucked up Evil Dead feel. Yeah, I love Evil Dead 2013. Coming in at number 19 is Fright Night 1985. This one still reigns pretty true for me. Fright Night is just a very fun 80s vampire movie while paying a lot of nods and homages to classic gothic Hammer horror roots, but they're much appreciated. And also the Peter Vincent himself being like an amalgamation of Peter Cushing and Vincent Price, played by Roddy McDowall. He does a great job. Gary's a likable protagonist. It's got some great special effects, kind of saved for the last like half hour or so for the most part, but they're still really well done. And the film, before it becomes an effects movie, is still engaging and entertaining, very much so in its own right. The characters are likable. The music is fantastic. Brad Fidel, um, not as good as Terminator, but is still pretty solid. Um, except for the piece of music called, I think it's called "Come to Me." Da na 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 na. Love that piece of music, and the Fright Night theme song is awesome. Love the Fright Night theme song. This is just a fun flick. Very much am glad that I finally just said, you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna check out Fright Night. And it's another movie that Meadow is also a big fan of too, partially due to her bias towards the Child's Play series. But yeah, Fright Night, it's still a very catchy film, or it's a very catchy name and a very simple name too. Fright Night. Hey, it works. Okay, give me a sec. Coming in at number 18 is my number one favorite vampire film of all time, 30 Days of Night. It's an oldie but goodie. So for the top 20 is fairly similar to my original top 20 list from uh 2021, but there are like the list has kind of been shuffled around a little bit, and there are a few new additions, but there are some movies that are kept over from that top 20 list. So some of them I'm not going to have much to say. The same goes for 30 Days of Night. Yeah, my favorite vampire film. It's very, very violent and very over the top. It's got a really good cast of lesser known character actors that do a really good job. It has a very good trapped and hopeless feel to it. And also has some good moments of suspense and feeling like you're being watched. And kind of like The Thing, it also has a really good isolated feel to it. And also like The Thing, it's a very snowy and cold film, which I really like. And the vampires, without a doubt, these are the nastiest and gnarliest, most fucked up vampires that I've ever seen in any movie. This movie is violent and fucked up beyond belief, and I love it. And I also got Meadow to watch this too. She liked it. Coming in at number 17 is Dawn of the Dead, 2004. I love the crap out of this movie. Now, admittedly, the last like 10 minutes of the movie or so kind of lose me, especially with its post-credit scene showing that the characters most likely do all die once they reach their island sanctuary, which is a shame. But I you can just kind of choose to ignore that and just pretend that the film's ending is kind of ambiguous. Um, but I still have a lot of nostalgia for this movie. This was the first film that I saw that had running zombies in it. And at the time, it just absolutely blew my mind. Um, I was like, what the fuck is going on here? Seeing this one armed zombie just tear assing its way towards somebody running at full speed. I was like, what the fuck am I watching here? So yeah, the quite revolutionary for its time. There were films that had running zombies in it before, but I think this was the first real big mainstream zombie film to showcase flesh-eating running zombies. And of course, the Day of the Dead 2008 remake would do as well. Well, there's 28 Days Later, but those aren't full-on zombies. And like I said, I mentioned flesh-eating zombies. And there would be other zombie films that would emulate this movie as well. But yeah, Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead is also probably one of Zack Snyder's more underrated films, in my opinion. And is one of his best. I love Dawn of the Dead 2004. Number 16, I'm not really going to say anything about because I've talked about it ad nauseum at this point. Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. I've talked about this movie many times. It's the best solo Freddy movie, my favorite of the solo Freddy series. It's just the best of Nightmare on Elm Street, aside from Freddy versus Jason. Enough said. Loved it. Love it. Excuse me. Here is probably the biggest new addition, number 15, Thanksgiving 2023. We now have a proper, full-blown Thanksgiving slasher movie. And I fucking love it. Not really a big fan of Eli Roth's filmography. Like I didn't like Cabin Fever. I didn't like The Green Inferno. Was not a fan of the Hostel series. I did like Death Wish 2018. Thought that was a really solid remake. But this, without a doubt, is Eli Roth's best movie. I've said before, I think the slasher genre is becoming something like werewolves and zombies. It's not what you do, but it's how you do it. Because technically, yes, Thanksgiving is kind of just a generic whodunit type slasher movie. But if it's done well, that's not a bad thing. And Thanksgiving is done pretty well. It has a kind of basic Scream type teenage young adult type cast, but they are still likable enough, at least. Like there's and all the acting is pretty solid, so I don't really think there's a bad character in this film. And the murder mystery, I mean, a lot of people have kind of said that's predictable, but I didn't really see it coming. But I wasn't overly surprised. But I think it's engaging enough to get you interested and you want to find out who it is. So I think that's, if it's a who done it murder mystery, that's the least that it can do, is that it keeps you guessing and it gets you invested. And that's what it did for me. But the highlight of Thanksgiving 2023 is the kick-ass kills and the fantastic practical effects. Some of the gnarliest kills of any slasher movie that I've seen in the last 10 years are showcased in this movie. And I stand by the statement of saying Thanksgiving, outside of the new Halloween trilogy, is the best slasher movie since Freddy versus Jason. I was very impressed by this movie. It was a huge, huge pleasant surprise. And I greatly look forward to Thanksgiving 2 coming out next year. I love the shit out of Thanksgiving 2023. And now I have a new yearly tradition of watching Thanksgiving every year on Thanksgiving, starting this year. Because I saw this movie very early this year. I think I saw it in January. Shit, I'm out of drinks. But that's okay. I'm almost done. Coming at number 14 is Doctor Sleep. Not going to say very much about this. A fantastic, superior sequel to a very poor, inferior film. Doctor Sleep is a masterpiece, an underrated film in Stephen King's filmography. Ewan McGregor is great. Rebecca Ferguson's great. The performances are all really good. The scares and suspense are really solid. The music's great. This is just a fantastic, fantastic movie. I love the living shit out of Doctor Sleep. despite the shitty ending, which never really works for me. But still, Doctor Sleep, love, love, love this movie. Number 13 is The Mist, my second favorite Stephen King horror film. Again, yes, the ending kind of does overshadow the rest of the movie, but the rest of the movie is still engaging as well. Great performances, really good kills, good special effects. It's quite violent and gory. And watching a bunch of people try to contend with a bunch of religious nut jobs at seemingly some kind of apocalyptic event is scary enough in and of itself. So, and it's very engaging too. So, yeah, The Mist is a very special film. And of course, it's topped off by one of the ballsiest and most fucked up endings you'll ever see in any movie, slasher movie, creature feature, or otherwise. Number 12 is the original Paranormal Activity, my favorite found footage film. I do like Lost Tapes a little more than this movie, but yeah, great scares, really good performances. One character is kind of crappy. And despite this movie being extremely low budget, it's one of the best examples of a creator thriving on few resources and still making a damn solid movie out of it. One of the scariest movies that I've ever seen in my life. It was one of the last films to really make me afraid to go to sleep. Yeah, I love Paranormal Activity. It's just a great, great, great ghost movie, great found footage movie, and it's just a good old spooky time. Coming in at number 11 is Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. No shame. I don't give a shit what anybody says about this movie. This is my favorite of the Friday the 13th series outside Freddy versus Jason. Yes, it's the most different. Yes, it's the most unconventional, but that's why I like it so much. It is different. It is unconventional. It's violent. It's gory. It's got some whack ass kills. Uh, some great special effects. And yeah, it is the most different. But you know what? I mean, hey, this is the closest that we will ever see, aside from the actual comic series, of seeing a Jason Voorhees movie crossing over with an Evil Dead film. I mean, hey, I think that'd be a good fun mix. Making Jason Voorhees into a Deadite, fuck it, I'll take it. That's awesome. Um, yeah, I love Jason Goes to Hell. Fuck all you haters. At number 10, we have another tie, Rob Zombie's Halloween and Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. I don't give a fuck what anybody says about for Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, like I said in my ranking the Halloween video with Shawnee Boy, a lot of criticisms that people throw at this film I do think are valid, and I do agree with. Loomis is a dick. The characters aren't likable. The music sucks. The white horse imagery is stupid and forced, but I still think to this day, I rewatched this yet again this October. Both of these movies are absolutely fantastic. I love both of these movies. They're some of my favorites of all time. It's one of the best double features for horror films that I could possibly imagine. I love both of the. I do prefer the first movie over the second film, but I just can't get enough of these movies. Fuck all you haters. The Halloween fan base fucking sucks. Yeah, I love these films. We have another tie coming in at number 9, It Chapters 1 and 2. I've talked about these movies to death. Yeah, Bill Skarsgård is fantastic as Pennywise. The kid characters in the first movie are better, but for the most part, the cast in Chapter 2 tries really hard to top them. I think Bill Hader and James McAvoy probably come the closest. In both movies, the effects are fantastic. There are some pretty intense and freaky sequences, namely in the first movie. And as I've said before, I think this is the best gold standard from here on out how Stephen King films should be adapted, especially if they're long or just in general, like if there's any longer novels that are very famous but have never gotten proper adaptations, like the Dune films seem to be taking inspiration from these two films as well. Or hell, Jurassic Park. I think an It 2017 style Jurassic Park movie where the first book is split into two movies. I think that would be really cool. And one that is much more accurate to the novel than the Spielberg version. Not to take anything away from that. But yeah, It chapters 1 and 2, they also um make a lot of efforts to be pretty accurate to the source material, ixnaying a couple scenes that definitely don't need to exist. So yeah, there's that. But yeah, these two films I cannot praise enough. And there's me and Meadows. There's some of me and Meadows' favorite films to watch together. Coming in at number 8, Day of the Dead, 1985. It's in competition with one other zombie movie that's debatably my favorite, but inarguably, without a doubt, Day of the Dead 1985 is my favorite of George Romero's Dead series. And it also is my favorite of the entire series if we count all the remakes and spin-offs. Day of the Dead is George Romero at his best. I Yes, it is a shame that the film does not live up to its original script. It's a shame that the film's budget was slashed because Romero refused to go by the studio's guidelines. But at that same time, it is admirable that Romero just said, "Fuck it, I'm just still going to do whatever I want. If you want to give me less money, I made Night of the Living Dead on $114,000. If you want to give me $3.5 million, I'll still make a good movie. Fuck all you guys." And he does. Day of the Dead 85 is just a fabulous zombie movie. Undoubtedly, it's Tom Savini's best work in special effects. It's very violent, very gory, very fucked up. It's got some great kills, and Captain Rhodes, choke on him. Need I say more? Bub is a fantastic zombie. He's very sympathetic, very captivating to watch. All the characters and acting and dialogue is top notch. I just love the living shit out of Day of the Dead 85. It's a damn solid movie. Coming in at number 7 is Doom 2005. Scared the living shit out of me when I first saw this movie. And it just entertains the living fuck out of me more and more every time I see it. Amazing special effects, fantastic gore, a fantastic cast. The Rock, Carl Urban. I can't remember Samantha's actress's name. Richard Brake. Um, I can't think of any others. It's a fantastic adaptation of Doom 3. All the monsters look great. It feels like a Doom movie. The first person shooter sequence is awesome and entertaining as hell. Great action scenes, great gore, great kills. This is just a batshit crazy, balls out, nuts movie, and I love the fuck out of it. And coming in at number 6 is Shaun of the Dead. This is the one that's in competition with Day of the Dead as being my favorite zombie movie. I just jump back and forth. Day of the Dead is just a batshit crazy fucked up movie, but Shaun of the Dead is just an entertaining as fuck hilarious movie with some fucked up kills to go along with it. Great special effects, great zombie carnage. It's funnier than all living fuck. I really wanted to see that because this was also released back in theaters for its 20th anniversary, but I missed out on it. I didn't know if my theater was playing it, but I really regret missing out on seeing that in theaters. But yeah, Shaun of the Dead, I love the living fuck out of. I like it more and more every time I see it. Definitely one of my favorite films and favorite horror movies and favorite zombie movies. Shaun of the Dead is just a great movie. Top 5 territory. Number 5, An American Werewolf in London. I've talked about this movie pretty ad nauseum too. Great British humor, amazing special effects, amazing werewolf designs and makeups and transformations. Um, some good TNA, uh, and some fantastic gore. This is just everything I love about the werewolf genre just rolled up into one, and also like great scares, great lore, just great homage and great representation of the werewolf genre. Yeah, An American Werewolf in London is a fantastic movie. Number 4, Aliens, a fantastic sci-fi horror movie, one of the greatest sequels of all time. Outside the Avatar films, this is definitively my favorite James Cameron movie outside Avatar. And I prefer Aliens to Terminator 2 now at this point. Not by much, just by a little bit. But yeah, I think Aliens now has beat out Terminator 2 just by the smallest of hair's breadths. Uh, but yeah, Aliens is a masterpiece. My favorite sci-fi horror film of all time. Second favorite. Yeah, second favorite. Number 3 is the final tie. It's a three-way tie. Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. I cannot let these two movies go. Or three, I should say. Yeah, three movies go. If I watch one now, I have to watch all three. Halloween 2018 is a fantastic return to form. It is a fantastic like return of the slasher genre to the cinemas, because now since then we've gotten quite a few slasher movies since then, like all three of these movies, the Terrifier movies, Thanksgiving. Yeah, we're having a little bit of a slasher resurgence, and it's all because of Halloween 2018. Halloween Kills is a batshit crazy, over the top slasher movie, but it's still entertaining as hell. That's why I want to watch it. It's like Thanksgiving. Like if you want to just give me an over the top slasher movie with a lot of good kills and a good variety, I'm happy. And Halloween Kills does exactly that. Halloween Ends, yes, is not the finale to the trilogy that we would have asked for. It does have some flaws, but I still think Halloween Ends is still a damn solid movie. It does a lot of good things for the franchise. Um, it does still have a decent final battle between Laurie Strode and Michael Myers. The guy who plays Corey Cunningham does a great job. And while it does feel a little out of place, David Gordon Green does do a good job emulating John Carpenter's Christine, which is somewhat fitting because Halloween is also a John Carpenter film. The kills, oh, they're not as good as 2018 and Kills. They still are pretty solid and fucked up, especially the dude that gets his face set on fire and the dude who gets his head bashed in and his tongue snipped off. That's pretty fucked up. Yeah, Ends. It's not a perfect movie. And it's not a perfect finale, but I still really like Halloween Ends. Like, fuck all you haters. But in general, Halloween 2018 Kills and Ends. If I watch one, I gotta watch all three. I just cannot let any of these go. I love the crap out of them. And again, they're some of my favorite films to watch with Meadow. Love them. Number 2, Freddy versus Jason. I have a whole hour and a half long review with Shawnee Boy talking about how awesome this movie is. Go watch that. I rewatched it again this year for October. Love the shit out of it still. Freddy versus Jason is a kick-ass movie. And finally, coming in at number 1, and what else could it be? I'm literally wearing the shirt. John Carpenter's The Thing. Still not the biggest fan of John Carpenter. And yes, I am aware that it's very ironic. Not a big fan of John Carpenter, but my favorite horror film is one of his movies and one of his nowadays most beloved films in his entire filmography. Rewatched it last night. It's the film that I watched to cap off Halloween and cap off the month of October. And it was a fitting end. John Carpenter's The Thing is just a masterpiece of horror cinema, action cinema, creature feature, and sci-fi cinema. So yeah, this definitely is my favorite sci-fi horror film. And this is one of my favorite shirts that Meadow ever got me. I don't wear it much though because I don't want to ruin it. But yeah, I love Oh, you met the actors for David and Griffin? Oh, damn. Oh, that's cool. Good for you, Anthony. Um Yeah, that's cool. But yeah, John Carpenter's The Thing, my favorite horror film of all time, one of my favorite movies in general of all time. Damn, that was a mouthful. Pardon all my stuttering and pardon all of my ahs and ums and tripping over my words. Obviously, it's been a minute since I've done a big list video this long. So I beg your pardon, but still, hope you all enjoyed. That is the cap of the spooky season for the most part. Post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and share this video with your friends. Look forward to future reviews. Hopefully, I'll try to knock out a few more videos before the end of the year, because hopefully 2025 will be a better year for content overall. But yeah, thank you all for watching. Go out. Happy Halloween. Happy November. Be safe. Go out and watch some horror movies. And I will see you guys in the next one.